Alright guys, so today we're going to go ahead and talk about inequalities, adding and subtracting, or solving addition and subtraction inequalities. It's no different than solving an addition and subtraction equation. The only thing that's different is that instead of an equal sign, it's going to have one of those inequality signs. So you should be on page 67 of your notebook. We're going to just start real basic and simple here. Best thing that we can do is just dive right on into it and just do a bunch of practice problems. So let's say that we've got x minus 7 is greater than or equal to negative 3. Okay, it's a one-step inequality that you're trying to solve. So we take note of what our operation is. So we have an x minus 7. Again, when we're solving equations, we want to get the variable by itself. It's the same idea when we're solving inequalities. We want to get that x isolated all by itself. So the inverse operations, if you need a reminder of what inverse operations are, just in case, or if you're new and you didn't learn about inverse operations yet, inverse operations, addition and subtraction, adding and subtracting, those are inverse operations. Another pair of your inverse is to multiply and divide. Okay, multiplication and division are inverse operations. They will undo each other. So since we happen to have a subtraction of 7 occurring here, my inverse operation is going to be to add 7. But I can't just add 7 here. I have to make sure that what I'm doing to one side happens over on the other side of the inequality as well. So a minus 7 or a negative 7 added with a positive 7, those are going to be what we call zero pairs. They're going to cancel each other out, so we can cross them off. But then don't forget, you have to add 7 to the other side. Once we've canceled this off, we're still left with x. X is now all by itself. We are left with our inequality sign, greater than or equal to, and then a negative 3 plus 7 is a 4. You never want to put your answer as just 4. That might have worked before when it was an equation, because the only answer it could possibly be was 4. But here, it's not an equation anymore. It's a greater than or equal to sign. That means 4 is an answer, but so is 4.01, so is 4.02, so is 4.3, so is 4.8, so is 5, so is 15. I mean, you've got a range of answers that will work for this inequality. Remember when we talked about graphing it, it means that you would graph a closed circle because you're including that 4. So let's say I have like a negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, I know that my value is going to start at 4. I'm going to draw a circle and close it because I've got that equal to sign underneath. And because my variable is on the correct side, it's on the left side, that means my inequality symbol looks kind of like an arrow. So if you notice, this is the same thing as this arrow right here, isn't it? So I know that I need to follow that direction. So I'm going to draw and shade in that general direction. And that represents that every number beyond this point is going to be a possible solution. Okay, let's take a look at another problem. Say we've got 4 is greater than x plus 9. 4 is greater than x plus 9. Okay, again, I want to get x by itself, but the first thing that I want to do is I want to make note of the fact that my x is on the right side of my inequality, and I don't think I like that very much. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rewrite this whole thing. I want to take x plus 9 and put it on my left side. I'm going to take that 4 and put it on the right side. And I'm going to go ahead and flip the inequality, because if you notice right now, the inequality, the mouth of the inequality, remember we talked about it, oh, the gator likes to eat the, bigger number. Right now, that gator mouth happens to be opened up to the 4, which kind of gives you a hint that the 4 is going to wind up being the bigger number, isn't it? The 4 is going to be the bigger number. So that gator mouth is open to the 4. I want that mouth to still be open to the 4, which means instead of it being a greater than sign, it now has to become a less than sign. Notice that the mouth is still open to the 4. You want to make sure that that happens. If you forget to switch your inequality when you rewrite, you're going to get the problem wrong. So you have to be very careful about that. Put a double star around this. Something to remind you, you need to be very careful with your rewrites. Okay, so once you have it rewritten, then you can go ahead and start solving it. So inverse operation, we see addition right now is x plus 9. So we need to do the inverse or the opposite operation. So instead of adding 9, the opposite is to subtract a 9. But remember, whatever you do to the left, you must do it to the right. So we're going to subtract 9 from that 4 as well. These 9s will cancel each other out because they're 0 pairs, right? A positive 9 and a negative 9, those are 0 pairs. The x still remains, and x is less than whatever 4 minus 9 is. What's 4 minus 9? Negative 5. So x is less than negative 5. Okay, so then if we were to go ahead and graph that, if I draw myself a little number line, maybe we'll have a negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7. Okay, so I know that my number has to start at negative 5. It's going to stay an open circle. It's going to remain open because it does not have an equal sign underneath it. Remember, with the first problem, we had an equal sign underneath it, and that's why we filled it. That's why we closed the circle. This does not have that equal sign, so that circle is going to stay open. And again, look at the direction that the inequalities arrow is pointing. That inequality arrow is pointing in the same direction that this arrow is, isn't it? So we need to go in that direction, which is to the left. There's your solution. All right, let's try just a couple more. And then we'll move on to some word problems. We have x plus 2 is greater than 1. X plus 2 is greater than 1. Our inverse operation is going to be to subtract. So we're going to subtract a 1 from both sides. Or sorry, not a 1. Subtract a 2 from both sides. Opposite of plus 2 is to subtract 2. We want to get x by itself, so we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. That's going to give us x is greater than negative 1. And then just a real quick graph. -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. I know my graph needs to start at -1. It's going to be an open circle because there's not an equal to sign underneath it. My inequality is pointing towards the right, just like this arrow is pointing towards the right. So that means that my shading is going to go towards the right. Okay. Let's say we've got -3 is greater than or equal to x plus 5. -3 is greater than or equal to x plus 5. First thing that I should do, rewrite it. And remember, we want to be real careful when we rewrite. We're going to put x plus 5 on the left side. We're going to put -3 on the right side. And don't forget, right now that mouth is open to -3. We want it to continue being opened to the -3. So the inequality is going to reverse itself. Okay, inverse operation, instead of adding 5, we're now going to subtract 5 from both sides. So these 5s are 0 pairs. They're going to cancel each other out. We're now going to get x is less than or equal to -8. Please make sure you're using your calculators. Double check yourself. I know some of you probably try to do that in your head and you're going to get some stuff wrong sometimes. You need to make sure you double check with the calculator. It's okay to try to do things in your head. Just double check yourself. -3 minus 5 gives you -8. Okay, so if we do a quick graph, so maybe I have a -10, -9, -8, -7, -6, -5, -4. Okay? Has the equal to sign underneath it. That means it's going to be a closed circle. So at -8, I'm going to fill that circle in. It's a closed circle. And look at the direction that the arrow of the inequality is pointing. It is pointing in the same direction that this arrow is right here. So we're going to follow this direction. We're going to go to the left. Okay, now it's not always going to be simple equations or inequalities statements. Sometimes you might have actual words that you have to translate into the inequality first, or a word problem that you're going to have to do. So let's do 2 problems practicing that, and then you can get onto your assignment. So go ahead and flip over to page 68 of your notebooks, please. I think this is problem 5. All right, so if I say that we have 4 less than x is greater than 6. 4 less than x is greater than 6. So I wanted to go ahead and throw this one in there because you see 2 terms that might be deemed as inequalities. You see less than, but you also see greater than. So the way that we know one of them is an operation and the other one's an inequality is by this word right here, is. Is greater than 6 means that's the inequality. That's going to be our inequality phrase. So we know it's going to be a greater than symbol. And guys, if you forget which ones are the greater than, the less than, the greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to phrases, make sure you go back to Friday's notes. so that you can see what some of those phrases are. So I know that my statement is going to be greater than 6. So I'm going to go ahead and write greater than 6. Now, for less than x, so less than is not the inequality. Less than here is going to be an operation. Less than means that we're going to subtract. Now, I like throwing this one in here as well because a lot of you get something like this wrong and you want to do 4 minus x. But that's not the correct order. It's 4 less than your value of x. That means you have your value of x and you're going to subtract 4 from it. So the term less than, that's an order changing operation. It reverses the order of your problem. So it's not going to be 4 minus x, it's going to be the reverse. You're going to switch it, x minus 4. So you're taking the 4 and you're taking the x and you're actually going to reverse them. You're going to interchange them. X minus 4 and you get greater than 6. X minus 4 is greater than 6. Okay, so now that you've translated it, you've got your statement, you can go ahead and solve. So our inverse operation for subtraction is to add. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. We're going to wind up adding 4 to both sides, and we'll cross those off. So that's going to give us x is greater than 10. And of course, you know, we could draw our quick little number line. If I've got 8, 9, 10, 11, I know it's going to be an open circle because there's not an equal sign underneath it. And it's pointing to the right, so I'm going to shade to the right. And then I'm done. Okay, so let's take one more problem. If we've got, you know, basic words, basic word translations, but you're also going to have actual word problems as well, like real world situations. So let's say that we've got an elevator. And, you know, elevators, they have restrictions to them. They have actual weight restrictions. So let's say that it can hold 2,800 pounds, 2,800 pounds, or less. Okay, an elevator can hold 2,800 pounds or less. So let's say that I want you to write, solve, and interpret an inequality. That describes how much more weight, how much more weight the elevator can hold. If it currently has 2,375, so 2,375 pounds on it, 2,375. Okay, so there's multiple things that I'm asking you to do here. I want you to write, solve, and then interpret an inequality. So I think a lot of times you guys quickly glance over things and you just want to write an answer real fast. Well, there's 3 things that you're having to do here. You need to make sure you follow through on all of them. First thing that I want to make note of is that the elevator can hold 28,000 pounds or less. 28,000 pounds or less. So let's start with the whole idea of writing. We're going to write an inequality first. So right now, the elevator's got 2,375 pounds on it. I'm starting off with 2,375 pounds. So this is my writing portion. I'm going to write. Now, I know that I can still add some more weight on. Don't know how much weight yet, but I know I can still increase the weight, and then I can get to my cutoff. This is considered to be a maximum weight. That's the max it can hold. So remember, we talked about that if it's a maximum meant less than or equal to. When we have a maximum, that means less than or equal to 2,800, right? 2,800 pounds or less. So it can equal 2,800 pounds or less. So there, you're done. You wrote your inequality. That's the writing portion. Okay, let's get on to the solving portion. So to solve it, in order to get x by itself, then I need to go ahead and subtract 2,375 from both sides. Okay, this is my solve. So if I subtract 2,375 from both sides, I'm going to get x is less than or equal to 425. Okay, so I did my solve part. I now know that x is less than or equal to 425. Now it says to interpret, to make an interpretation. So interpret what that means. When it says that x can be less than or equal to 425, that means that the most weight you can put into that elevator is 425 pounds. The most weight you could put on the elevator is 425 pounds. Okay, if you go over that amount, then you're going to be exceeding the limitation that it's provided. Okay, so at this point, you guys can go ahead and stop the video and get started on your assignment. You just need to go up to the sub and ask them for the assignment if they haven't passed it out yet.